I know for a fact that there are some teachers in the room here today. So let me ask you in particular, what do you hear when I say, Professor Perea, that book that you assigned, it literally blew my mind? Or, Ms. Green, can we go to lunch? I am literally starving to death. Is that nails on a chalkboard for you? For me, I mean, we've all heard it before, that literally, when we mean figuratively or metaphorically. We've probably said it at some point. We know we don't really mean literally, but I think it's a way of saying, look, I know that what I'm about to say is a little bit of a cliche, but this time I really want you to listen to it. This time I really mean it, and I want you to pay attention. I mean, a kid who says that her heart is literally breaking, she knows that she's not in any immediate danger of cardiac arrest, but she's just as likely to give you a world-class roll of the eyes if you point out to her what she literally just said. She knows what she said. She knows that you know what she said. She knows that you know what she meant. And it's really uncool of you to get hung up on all these literal details. Now, most of us know how metaphor works. We know it without having to have it explained to us. It's part of how children learn language, how they gain language, being able to decode things that are obviously not literally true, but say something true nonetheless. Kids get that without really having to be taught. I mean, children's stories, children's worlds are full of metaphorical language, and children very quickly learn how to decode, how to interpret that language. They know that their daddy isn't literally a bear first thing in the morning, but they understand what that says about daddy, and even what it says about bears, even if they've never really seen a bear. They know that when Grandpa calls them wild monkeys, they know what he means. And they don't get caught up in analyzing the ways that they are and are not like monkeys. They just understand it. Sometimes when we're talking, we don't even realize that we're speaking metaphorically. It's become such a part of our language, such a part of our way of speaking. Like when we talk about the legs of a table or a fork in the road, that doesn't even register with us as being metaphorical. But sometimes we use metaphor to make our language richer, to make it more intense, to make it stronger. Like when we say that the eyes of our beloved are like two limpid pools glittering in the moonlight, rather than saying her eyes are blue. When we speak in metaphor, we hold two things next to each other in our mind, and the power of the metaphor can be just as much about the way those two things are different as about the way those two things are the same. When T.S. Eliot compares the night sky to a patient etherized upon a table, we may not immediately know what he's saying, and we may struggle to understand it, but part of the richness of the metaphor is the strangeness of it. And we'll never look at the night sky quite the same way again. Having said that, metaphor is not in any way less real or less true than literal language, as long as everybody in the conversation understands the way metaphor works. Like the kids with daddy not really being a bear, they understand the way it works, and so the language is true. And the most essential rule of understanding how metaphor works is that it breaks down. It becomes ridiculous if we examine it too closely or take it too literally. I mean, most of us understand this. Metaphor is like a kid's toy. Metaphor is like a kid's toy. It stops working if you take it apart to try to understand how it works. But metaphor isn't just ornamental language. It's not just language that's been decorated to make it richer or to make it more beautiful. It's a way for language to leverage itself. It's a way for our limited language to talk about things that are really completely beyond speech. Metaphor is a way of stretching finite, concrete language and the finite, concrete limits of our minds to be able to talk about things that are way beyond language, way beyond words, a way of making words say more than they can really say, by drawing analogies rather than equivalencies. Now, when we're talking about concrete things like a rock or a tree, there can be a pretty close correlation between the words we're saying and the things we're talking about. There's a pretty literal one-to-one correlation. But as soon as we start talking about more abstract things, our language has to get more abstract, and it has to get more metaphorical. We can't speak concretely about abstract things. Take love, for example. Just thinking about a few songs that were popular when I was young. Love is a river, love is a razor, love is a battlefield, love is like oxygen, love lifts us up where we belong, love is all you need. Without metaphor, we really couldn't say very much about love. And without metaphor, we really can't say much about God. By definition, God is beyond the ability of our limited human-made language to describe. God is beyond the ability of our limited human minds to encompass. So metaphor is a way for our limited human language to reveal God, or at least to reveal something about God, even if it's only a little piece of God. Now, we have to be careful, though, because some of the metaphors for God that have come down to us in our tradition may have lost some of their power to reveal God because they don't really fit our experience of God anymore. An example might be the image of God that we see through a lot of our tradition of God as a king, God as a military ruler, God as a governor. At some point, this metaphor was presumably helpful to people who lived in some sort of feudal culture where their whole lives were arranged around hierarchies of power, and God was, by definition, the most powerful entity in that hierarchy. But a lot of us today don't find this a very meaningful, a very helpful way to talk about our relationship with God, our relationship with the God that we know to be loving, that we know to be vulnerable. Another example might be a view that was popular in the Enlightenment and the early modern movement of God as a cosmic clockmaker. God built the universe, God set in motion all the laws of physics and all the laws of the universe, and then once the universe was humming along, God walked away to go do something else somewhere else. And God doesn't intervene in human affairs. Again, that was a useful metaphor for some folks who were trying to understand the universe in a particular way, but for those of us who take seriously the Bible as a record of humanity's interaction with God, the God we find in the Bible doesn't seem much like a disinterested clockmaker. The God in the Bible gets in there, gets involved, changes history. So that metaphor, I don't know, it doesn't have the resonance it once had. Now, some of the metaphors that we use to reveal God, or that used to reveal God, lose some of their power because we just don't understand the analogy. They don't make sense to us. A lot of the images in the book of Revelation are that way. Things that would have been cliches to people 2,000 years ago are so weird to us and have lost their meaning so much that we don't really understand what they're talking about. Like 7 golden lampstands or a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. That doesn't really mean anything to us.